line from Merced to Bakersfield. The authority estimates this so-called Central Valley line will cost $18.3 billion to build, money the rail authority already has in hand, and will be operational by 2028. As we all know, in 2008, the voters approved Proposition 1A to provide $9 billion in bonds to help build a 500-mile-long high-speed rail system from San Francisco to Los Angeles. At that time, the estimate for the full cost of the project was $45 billion and was to be completed by 2020. Proposition 1A prescribes specific route and design requirements for the high-speed rail system, including that it must be electrified, be capable of sustaining speeds of no less than 200 miles per hour, and have the capacity to achieve travel times between San Francisco and Los Angeles of 2 hours and 40 minutes. Since that time, we have seen numerous variations on where the rail line would be built and when we could expect a completed system. Although the governor remains committed to building the full system, he states that his new plan is about what the state can do with the resources that we have. Today's hearing is about getting a better understanding of the authority's plan, including all of its moving pieces, the risks that are involved, and the trade-offs that must be made, and opinions of experts outside the direct sphere of the authority's influence, so that we, the legislature, can make informed decisions about the future of this project. We will hear today from Vice Chair of the Authority Board of Directors, Tom Richards, as well as Director Brian Kelly. We will also hear from Danny Curtin, one of the Assembly's appointees to the Authority Board. Mark Evans, CEO of the Early Train Operator, is here to present some of his findings to this committee, and we will then hear from the Legislative Analyst's Office and the High Speed Rail Peer Review Group, who continue to provide expert analysis of the project. Finally, we will hear from representatives of our regional partners without whom high-speed rail simply could not work. Members, as Chair Fraser has said before, proceeding with this project will not be for the faint of heart. So let's go into it fully informed and with a clear understanding of what it will take. I'd like to now ask Assemblymember Fong if he'd like to make some comments.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone for being here. It's no secret that I am a skeptic of this project, and certainly the challenges that lay ahead of us and the use of taxpayer dollars is extremely important to me. And so as we move forward, we have a December 2020 deadline that needs to be met before federal funds may be clawed back and de-obligated. And so how does the High Speed Rail Authority seek to even attempt to reach that milestone? So I have a lot of questions, I think, still that are left to be unanswered, but I look forward to the questions and the answers from the High Speed Rail Authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fong. Assemblymember Friedman, any opening comments?
Sure, just briefly. I'm Laura Friedman. I represent a district that includes Burbank and the Burbank Airport, which is a location that's important to the future of this project. Should it make it that far, it's intended to be possibly the main high-speed rail terminal for the Los Angeles area, and also part of what's considered the bookend projects in Los Angeles that receive some funding through high-speed rail, being the routes that right now are Metrolink routes between Burbank and Anaheim. I live in an area that is very heavily impacted by traffic congestion, by air quality issues, as this area is as well. I consider myself to be a very strong advocate for mass transit and alternative transportation to cars. So I'm very interested in trains in general and expanding our rail line, whether it's with light rail and subways, that type of rail in urban areas, but also as being a cleaner and more convenient and safer alternative for people to go from population center to population center across California. My questions are going to be around how this project fits into that, how this project helps reduce congestion across the state and air quality, and that if we do go forward with this project, when we go forward with it, how to best utilize dollars to get people out of their cars across the state of California and make sure that we give people a more convenient alternative to driving around the state. So that's where my focus is going to be, and I'm really happy to see such a big turnout, and I'm very interested in hearing from the experts. I've only been in the legislature for 3 years, so this is relatively new to me as someone who's asked to be a policymaker, and I know a lot of you who are here today to speak have many, many years with this project and others, so I'm interested in hearing from all of the stakeholders and all of the experts. I want to thank my colleagues for being here, and also Transportation Chair Jim Frazier for convening this meeting. Even though he's not able to be with us here today, he's here with us in spirit. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the first panel to come forward. Members, as if you know, we've asked that those presenting to keep it short, as I hope to keep this more of a question-driven hearing. Feel free to interrupt and engage our panelists as needed. I want us to get to the heart of things today as much as we can. And for the public, there will be ample time to hear from the following panels. Because I suspect many of you will want to speak, I'd ask you to make your comments complete but succinct. And to the extent you can help us focus on the specific items we will be discussing today, that would be appreciated. With that, let's begin today's hearing. Director Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Brian Kelly. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the High-Speed Rail Authority here for the state of California. My committee vice chairman, Tom Richards, is en route. I apologize he's not here yet, but he is en route to this hearing, and he may also appreciate the opportunity to address the committee when he gets here. I also want to thank the members of the committee for coming down. I know how busy it is when you're a legislator, and to take time out of your schedule to come here, join us on a tour of the project today, see what we're building in the Valley. It's greatly appreciated, so thank you very much for taking the time to come down here. I think the biggest change we've made since I took over as the CEO of this authority in February of 2018 was really in the midst of the announcement of cost and schedule issues on the project. And to me, that was the beginning point of us saying, let's take a new look at how we move forward on this project. And so in the midst of that, assessing what we see our revenues as being over the course of the next 10 years or so, with the cap and trade program going out until 2030, and our bond dollars that are still available to this program under Proposition 1A. Working closely with the administration and our board, we've moved toward a philosophy of doing this like you build many transit projects around the state. And that is, when you don't have all the funding you need in hand to build everything, you build it in a building block approach. And that's been the principles for the authority since before I got here. But really with the cost and schedule issues that emerged just when I started on this project, it became heightened that we should start an early interim operating segment when we can in the Valley, and then work toward expanding that program further. Before I go any further, let me welcome my Board Vice Chair, Tom Richards, and I think before I say much else, let me defer to him to address the committee. Tom, thank you.
Let me first apologize. I was waiting for your late lunch. So, apologize for that. Let me welcome you here, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Richards. I'm the one who's late today. Lenny Mendonca, as you may know, our chair, was here most of last week leading the California Economic Summit. As you also know, earlier this year, the governor introduced his administration's thoughts with regards to this project, which included a building block approach. The approach is to get high-speed rail operating on shorter service as early as possible, and he discussed Bakersfield-Merced. Excuse me. In May, our management at High Speed Rail produced for you its biannual project update report. That was on May the 1st, and in that report, endorsed the idea of a building block approach and specifically discussed the benefits of the Bakersfield-Merced early service segment. Later this spring, in June, the Finance and Audit Committee, of which I chair, along with two members of the Board of Directors, who include Ernie Camacho from Southern California and Nancy Miller from Northern California, task our financial advisors for the authority, KPMG, to produce a business case report for the Bakersfield-Merced segment, and to, in that report, to address the benefits and the other issues surrounding an early service between Bakersfield and Merced. Later that day, Director Camacho introduced an action or a motion with the Board of Directors, the purpose of which was to task the early train operator to look into a complete side-by-side study of options of early service in Northern California, Central California, and Southern California. Both of these studies are underway. They're complex assignments, and we believe, or I believe at least, that they will form the basis for the 2020 business plan. I would like to add also, and I believe you're well aware of this, that it is the board's existing action in approval of the 2018 business plan that it endorsed the initial operating segment between Bakersfield and the Silicon Valley / Bay Area. Other areas of ongoing focus for our board are compliance with the federal grants that we have, which require, as you know, completion by December 31st of 22, the acceleration of construction activities, row acquisition, third-party agreements, environmental clearance, and compliance with the 2018 State Auditor's Report. These are the activities that our board are actively involved with and concerned about. I wanted to address those with you briefly and then turn over the balance of the presentation on the project update to CEO Kelly. Brian.
Thank you, Tom. I think I'll just move now to expedite things here to a presentation that we prepared for this committee, and hopefully this will move along as I click these buttons. Yes. So this is intended to just sort of give you a status check of where we are right now in the project in terms of our global goals and objectives, and also to give you a sense of the status of electrified high-speed rail in California today. So the first important point for us is, what do we start with? At the authority, we start with our mission, and our mission is clearly defined under the law. Our mission is to build a high-speed train system that utilizes an alignment and a technology capable of sustained speeds of 200 miles per hour or greater. That is established in the bond bill. It is reiterated in other sections of the law. And so when we talk about technologies, rolling stock, other things, we are always driving toward that objective to build an electrified high-speed rail system that meets those speeds. And that's an important objective because in California today, if you get on conventional rail from the LA basin and you travel to the San Francisco Bay Area, that's a 12 or 13-hour trip. And in 2020 or 2019, that's embarrassing. We want to get that trip done in under 3 hours, and we think we can. So that is the mission that the voters sent us on, and that is how we move. Now, as I stated earlier, we don't have all the funds in hand, and we never have, to build all of that system. We've never had all the money we need to build it all. So the approach is to build it in building blocks, which is traditionally how you build transit systems up and down the state of California, across the country. There are three principles that have guided the board's decisions in how we move forward in a constrained funding environment. First, initiate high-speed rail service in California as soon as possible. Make strategic concurrent investments that will be linked over time and provide mobility, economic, and environmental benefits at the earliest possible time, and position ourselves to construct additional segments as funding becomes available. Now, we are moving forward in a way that I think most people don't appreciate toward each of these objectives. And I want to show that here. In 2020, the status of this project is this. The green segments on this graph are where we are in full project development. In the middle section of the state, that 171-mile stretch represents Bakersfield to Merced. 119 of those miles are currently under construction. Just last week, we announced we have completed the environmental work to get into downtown Bakersfield. The next environmental document that we clear will be the extension to Merced in the north. So that's a 171-mile stretch in the middle of the valley. In Northern California, in the Bay Area, today we are electrifying. We are a major funding partner in electrifying the Caltrain system between San Francisco and San Jose. That's 51 miles of electrified rail in the Bay Area. And then in the Southern California region, we have a new player, really, and an important player that is really, I think, changing the game in Southern California for how we can bring electrified rail into Los Angeles. And that is the emergence of the Virgin train line from Las Vegas to Victorville. That is a 180-mile stretch, and 130 of those miles are in the state of California. This project has made two dramatic changes that have brought it to life. The first is its management and ownership has changed. It is now run and operated by entities that are very reputable in the world of transportation. Brightline Trains operates trains in Florida today, and Virgin Trains, the oversight company. Virgin is, of course, Richard Branson's Virgin Company and Virgin Airlines, which folks are familiar with. So these are players in the transportation sector. The other very important change that project made in recent years was making the commitment to move from diesel service to high-speed electrified rail. And so now they are building an electrified line. While the risk for that project and the money coming in to pay for the capital expenditures is coming from the private sector, I want to be clear that this is truly a public-private partnership. And three different ways this is a public-private partnership. The first is they have sought from our tax credit allocation committee with the state access to low-cost capital, and they've sought the same through our infrastructure bond bank. And they have been approved at both levels to move forward with access to low-cost or tax-exempt bonding authority, which lowers their cost of capital. So that's occurred. The High-Speed Rail Authority itself and the State Transportation Agency has entered an MOU with Virgin Trains, where we will discuss things like reservations, ticketing, equipment, interoperability, things we could do to make sure we can share each other's lines and ultimately perhaps provide infrastructure we can both ride on. And so that is an important element toward that MOU. And lastly, and most importantly for that project, the Secretary of the State Transportation Agency has to provide the right-of-way for them to construct that project. That project, and I'm very jealous of this point, that project is being constructed on almost entirely public right-of-way owned by the state of California and the Department of Transportation. And so that is an element where the state is partnering on all of those fronts to move that project forward. So in this picture here, the green is where we're under project development. The dotted lines are where we are still working through our environmental process. Everywhere else, the environmental process is complete. This is what things will look like in 18 to 24 months. In 18 to 24 months, we could be under construction on all of these segments. The Virgin Line segment in Southern California, the 171 miles in the Valley, and the 51 miles in the Bay Area. And so if you overlay Prop 1A's Phase 1 system, we would have, just on Phase 1 alone, on the order of 230 miles under construction. And the dark lines now, the completed lines that were dotted before, represent the completion of all of the environmental work for this system. So what this means in the next 18 to 24 months, 350 miles of electrified high-speed rail under construction in California, and all of the environmental work for all of Phase 1 between San Francisco and Los Angeles and Anaheim will be complete. We are funding partners all over the state today, not just in our investments in the Valley, but all over the state of California. In Southern California, we're in for about $1.3 billion now, including $441 million for the Los Angeles Union Station, which is seeking to upgrade not only to provide benefits or accommodate high-speed rail when it gets there, but also to improve the flow of trains and the frequency of trains moving through that station by regional and local providers. We are funding to the tune of $363 million all of the environmental work on our shared corridor down there between Burbank and Anaheim. So all of the work down there on the environmental side that will ultimately benefit us, Metrolink, Losan, and others, we are funding that environmental work, and we are performing that environmental work in that segment. We have committed $77 million to fix at one time, the highest ranking public safety concern for grade separation projects in California at Rosecrans Marquardt down in Los Angeles. And of course, the Prop 1A bond bill itself contained about $398 million for connectivity projects that went to other projects outside of ours where we would ultimately be connecting. So in Southern California, we're in for $1.3 billion. In the Bay Area, we're in for about $1.6 billion. The biggest chunk of that is $714 million that we are committing in both Prop 1A bond funds and cap and trade dollars to electrify the Caltrain project between San Jose and San Francisco. And we are doing that because, one, it will provide early benefits and early system improvements for Caltrain to operate, remove diesel, and operate with electric trains. And this will ultimately be a corridor that we will share when we get there. And so we're laying the groundwork for high-speed rail entering that corridor as well. Similarly to Southern California, we're spending $293 million in environmental review work, both between San Jose and Merced and San Francisco and San Jose. That work is underway. The draft environmental documents will be released in 2020, and we will be getting to the final environmental documents completed in 2021 for this system. $84 million are spent at the San Mateo grade separation project, again, a high-ranked public safety concern project that we are funding partners on in that corridor, and similarly to the Los Angeles corridor, $543 million in Prop 1A funds are going for connectivity projects in the Northern California and Bay Area as well. So in the Bay Area, we're in for $1.6 billion. And then finally, this is our schedule on the environmental documents. As you see on the left column is our project segment. As I mentioned earlier, we were very pleased to announce last week that we had completed our work from Fresno into downtown Bakersfield, working closely with the city of Fresno and the county of Kern on what that alignment should look like. It was a supplement to our earlier alignment, and we just completed that work on the last day of October. I signed the ROD, and we're well ahead of schedule on that. And then these are all listed in order. As you can see, the Central Valley Y, the Merced stretch is next, Bakersfield to Palmdale, Burbank to LA, Palmdale to Burbank, San Jose to Merced, San Francisco to San Jose, and finally Los Angeles to Anaheim. As you can see in the second column, all of the draft environmental documents will be released in 2020, and we will work to finalize those and get a ROD date, the certification of that environmental document, by the end of 2021. The last column is an important column just relative to our federal funding agreement. This is work that we must get done under our Federal Funding Act agreement by the end of 2022. And that last column reflects the amount of float, if you will, or the amount of number of months we have that show how ahead of schedule we are in terms of if we execute the ROD on the date that we indicate in column 3, that's how many months we are in front of the federal schedule in column 4. So as I said, there's a lot happening here with high-speed rail, electrified high-speed rail in California. Today, we're moving forward, working through the 119 miles in construction here. I will say this, I've always said this since I had this job, and I will say it at every hearing I'm at. We will have challenges. This is a mega infrastructure project. The other one prior to this that I'm the most familiar with is work when I was the Secretary of Transportation over the Bay Bridge in the San Francisco Bay Area. And mega projects have challenges. Our objective and our duty is to be very clear on what those challenges are and tell you what opportunities we have and how we're going to address those challenges to move forward. And so that's kind of a high-level summary of where things stand today. And with that, I'm happy to conclude and open to questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Kelly and Vice Chair Richards. If I can, I'd like to start with questions and then pass it off to Assemblymember Friedman. I'd like to ask, what should we expect to see in the 2020 business plan?
I think in the 2020 business plan, some of what you will see is what Board Member Richards indicated. We have a couple of reports that we are working through right now. I think those are going to drive some of our determinations in the 2020 business plan. I think you will see us driving forward on getting the work done in the Valley, and a plan and program, as I sort of indicated in this PowerPoint presentation, to complete all of the work that we have to get done to meet our 2022 ARA grant requirements, first as our highest priority. Then secondly, moving to an interim operability segment. And then third, completing all of the environmental work so we can focus and work on closing the gaps between the Valley and the Bay Area and the Valley and Los Angeles going forward. So I think you'll see that laid out. I guess the one other thing I'd say, I would like us in the business plan, and this is something we still have to work through our board, of course, but to have three distinct strategies outlined in that plan for the various regions. And again, I think with the emergence of Virgin Trains in Southern California, there's interesting opportunity there, and there's additional opportunity in the Bay Area with things that they're looking at regionally. So I think you'll see, here's what we intend to do in the short term with the money we have, and here's our longer term goals to extend electrified high-speed rail in California.
Can you comment on the NEPA MOU agreement that was recently attained and how that helps the authority?
Yes, thank you. In July of this year, the federal government granted us something called NEPA Assignment Authority. For those of you who have been in transportation for some time, this is the authority to do the federal environmental review work concurrently with the state environmental review work, instead of it being two distinct separate processes, one done here and one done in Washington, D.C. You have to do them both, but this is an opportunity to streamline the process and work through them both together. So nationally, about 5 or 6 different states have been doing that on the highway side. California is one of them, and California has done very well in terms of saving time and money through that process. We have now become, with the granting of this proposal, we originally asked for it 18 months ago, but it was granted in July of this year from the federal government, and we are now the first rail project in the nation to get NEPA assignment. And what it means for us is, I expect that it means we will move more quickly through the federal part of the environmental review process. Again, we have to do all of the things that need to be done. We need to maintain a very good working relationship with our federal partners because they maintain some role in continued reviews and approvals. But rather than sending every document back to Washington, D.C. and waiting for a response, we can now walk across a hallway and have our firewalled NEPA team do that work and approve these documents. So we do expect it to save time. We do expect it to save money. And candidly, the first environmental document that we cleared the rod to Bakersfield was the first one we've done under that NEPA assignment.
It's encouraging to hear ways in which we can become more efficient and to become quicker. And so I'd like to ask now about the necessary spend rate to meet the FRA grant requirements, and what is our current spend rate?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have in front of me the exact spend rate that we have on the project right now, but I can tell you that we are reporting quarterly on where we are in terms of our expenditure rate and meeting the ARA grant agreement. The biggest challenge we have had is that in the Valley, and this is largely because we commenced construction prior to having all the right-of-way in hand here and all the utility relocations identified and moved. That has been the sort of first-order work that we are still grinding through. However, we are improving that system. We've streamlined some of that right-of-way process going forward, so things like land conveyances and some of the acquisitions we can do at a quicker pace. So we've begun that process now. And that work is going forward. Our spend rate is climbing. I think this month, I was just told that we'll be spending just under $50 million this month on the construction here in the Valley. And so we continue to just grind through the process here and are looking to as my chief operating officer likes to say, a construction line is an S-shaped figure, and you go through the first order of work, and it's pretty flat, but once you get that done, your spend rate jumps up pretty quickly as you're now rolling through construction. So as we complete that first order of work, I expect our spend rate will continue to increase. We do report this quarterly to the legislature now and to our peer review group. I just don't have the data in front of me at the moment, so I apologize for that.
No, it's okay. If I may, I'd like to change gears and ask about SB1
Yes.
and whether or not it is able to fund rail improvements, and how much money, for example, high-speed rail has received from the passage of SB1.
SB1 does provide dollars for rail improvements, but it doesn't provide any dollars for high-speed rail. There are several programs by which SB1 can fund rail improvements. The primary one is called the Transit Capital and Intercity Rail Improvement Program, and that funds a lot of commuter rail projects. However, we are not eligible to participate in that fund, and so out of SB1, we have and will receive no funding.
Has the Southern California, just as an example, received any money for rail in that region due to SB1?
Yes. Again, I'm most familiar with the TIRCP program, and through that program, I think since the beginning of that program, including SB1 dollars, that region has received on the order of $2.7, $2.6, $2.7 billion.
Great. With that, I will conclude my questions and hand it over to Assemblymember Friedman.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Kelly and Mr. Richards, for being here and speaking with us today. I have a couple of questions. My first is, one part of the governor's vision of how this project's going to roll out and why we should be investing in this section of project is to demonstrate viability and to